I don't see how China can be an honest broker in this game. And so for the Chinese, as we have spoken already, I believe the continuation of the war provides an excellent opportunity to distract the West and to keep if not the US in this case, but definitely Europe, busy on the western side of the Eurasian supercontinent, let's put it this way, while China is preparing its own imperial return in the South China Sea in its own periphery. And so any negotiations that would include Russia and China at the same time without the US, without the European Union, without the UN, I don't see how this would be fair. It would be effectively, I mean, China would be pretending that they are, they were equal and that they are known as broker, but I don't see this is happening. So Ukraine should be quite wary about such propositions.
Hi everyone, welcome to 24 War and Politics YouTube channel. Today my guest is Voyger, president and founder of the Kyiv Institute for National and Global Security. We are going to discuss potential Chinese participation in peace talks, Orban's open letter to Zelenskyy, and how Hungary blocks 20th package of sanctions against Russia. Also, we are going to discuss current political and military position of Putin and potential Russian aggression against NATO. Mark, thank you for being with us.
Maxym, thank you for having me on.
Xi Jinping stated that there has to be provided equal participation of all parties in peace talks. After this statement, some experts said that China can join to trilateral peace talks between US, Russia, and Ukraine. How do you assess possibility of Chinese participation and under what conditions it could happen?
I don't see how any Chinese participation in this format can be productive, especially for Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine, Russia, China, I mean, whose side on is China? If China has been supporting the Russian military effort since day one, politically, economically, technologically, financially, information-wise, and other, in other ways, I don't see how China can be an honest broker in this game. And so for the Chinese, as we have spoken already, I believe the continuation of the war provides an excellent opportunity to distract the West and to keep if not the US in this case, but definitely Europe, busy on the western side of the Eurasian supercontinent, let's put it this way, while China is preparing its own imperial return in the South China Sea in its own periphery. And so any negotiations that would include Russia and China at the same time without the US, without the European Union, without the UN, I don't see how this would be fair. It would be effectively, I mean, China would be pretending that they are, they were equal and that they are known as broker, but I don't see this is happening. So Ukraine should be quite wary about such propositions.
No. I mean, if China would participate as the fourth part with USA, Ukraine, and Russia.
Well, okay. So obviously, Ukraine and Russia is the warring parties. Russia is the aggressor. Again, in this case, the U.S. Obviously under the Trump administration has so far demonstrated that it is more willing to put pressure on Ukraine to end the war rather than on Russia. So again, we have this, actually the situation would not improve dramatically without the presence of the Europeans, especially the countries in Western Europe who support you 100%. And if it's going to be such a global peace effort, then the UN must be somehow also involved, or other organizations, the OSCE. So otherwise, Ukraine risks being put in a situation where two of the three parties claim that they're honest brokers, but everybody supports openly or secretly supports Russia and puts pressure on Ukraine. So I don't see this as fair, and as useful for Ukraine. Actually, it could be a trap in the long run.
Okay, I got you. I don't see any possibilities that it can happen. I mean Chinese participation.
No, I don't. I mean, I cannot say that it will not happen. Of course, it may happen. What I'm saying is, I'm warning that it could be. It could put Ukraine in a very disadvantageous position.
Okay, I got you. Steve Witkoff said that he believes in bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Putin. I would like to ask you, under what circumstances such meeting can occur, in your opinion?
I don't think Putin would agree to anything else but the capitulation of Ukraine. And so Witkoff's words should not be taken at face value. Witkoff is grossly incompetent when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to diplomacy. He's a real estate tycoon from New York City. He knows little, if anything, about the world, especially about Eastern Europe, about the nature of war, about the specifics of this particular war. As you know, he constantly mixes up cities, facts. He comes, he go to meetings unprepared. He goes to Moscow without an interpreter. I mean, that's majorly unprofessional on his part. So I don't think that whatever he says should be taken seriously. Yeah, he may be thinking that he would like Zelensky and Putin to meet, and I'm sure somebody on the Russian side may be suggesting that if the Ukrainians agree, maybe we can have a meeting of this nature. What I'm saying is that he may be speculating. I don't think he has a serious, verifiable information about this. Also, for Zelensky to agree and to go to a meeting of this format, of course, he could ultimately decide to do that. But where is it gonna take place? Turkey, Qatar, the Emirates,
Switzerland.
Many questions. Yeah. So I don't think Witkoff seriously.
This week, American delegations had a meeting with Ukrainian one and with Kirill Dmitriev in Geneva. How do you understand development of these talks, and do you believe in any outcome, any efficient outcome? I mean,
we all know that for Russia, for the Kremlin, for Moscow, diplomatic negotiations are part of the hybrid warfare game that they've been playing for decades, for centuries. It distracts, it divides the public opinion, it buys time for the Kremlin to actually continue their operations. We haven't seen the bombardment of Kyiv and the other major cities subside or being reduced during those negotiations. So I don't see these negotiations as on the part of the Kremlin as something that is done in good faith. They have ulterior motives. Of course, they need to continue enticing Trump through the persona of Witkoff, dangling those multi-trillion dollar supposedly potential business projects in Russia, and so they need to keep the impression for Trump to save face that Russia is at the table, Russia wants to negotiate, and then we know what happens. Trump then says, well, Putin wants to get it to reach a deal. Now it's Zelensky's time. So it's the same old game, whether it's Geneva or any other place. Unless Russia is defeated decisively or suffers some catastrophic failure, military, political, economic, I don't see them negotiating seriously about ending this war.
At the same time, the U.S. Secretary of State was asked whether there might be a moment when the Donald Trump administration would change its tactics and increase pressure on Russia. Rubio responded, the administration continues to sell weaponry to Ukraine. We don't sell weapons to Russia, and we don't sanction Ukraine. Actually, it's a very weird statement especially about sanctions against Ukraine. Why did Rubio say it? What does it indicate?
Well, I would like to ask him a more important question. Why did he give up the most one of the most important positions in the U.S., which is a senator? At a very early age, he could have stayed a senator for decades and enjoyed all sorts of privileges and importance, clout, political influence, etc., just to be seen as, unfortunately, a member of this current administration and make absurd statements of this nature. I mean, he's a smart person. I used to respect him a lot in his previous career, but now saying things that are contradictory and that are actually quite frankly absurd. The only explanation I have is that he's just trying to come up with anything because the Trump administration is not putting any real pressure. And so he had to come up with any excuse, with anything that he may portray as some kind of a fair deal. So, but none of what he said made sense to me. So we have to ask him. But that's the only logical explanation I have is that he's also at a loss and he's not very comfortable in his position now.
I would like to talk to you about Orban's open letter to Zelenskyy. Hungarian Prime Minister openly accused Ukrainian president of anti-Hungarian position and called immediately reopen Druzhba pipeline. What does it indicate in terms of domestic and geopolitics?
I mean, I don't think anyone is surprised that Orban is acting as Putin's emissary, as Putin's lapdog, as Putin's messenger, as Putin's agent of influence, effectively. It's not a secret that Hungary and not Hungary as a country, but Hungary as the government, and of course Orban and his entourage, they've been consistently pro-Russian over the years. And so they've always used this ethnic card that supposedly Ukraine is anti-Hungarian, that the Hungarian minority supposedly is being, their rights are have been infringed upon, etc., etc. I mean, all these accusations that we've heard a million times over. And of course, the Druzhba pipeline. It's a convenient pretext. It's an excuse for Orban to actually be able to put pressure on Ukraine and tell its colleagues from the European Union, see, the Ukrainians have damaged the pipeline. This is damaging Hungary's business interests, and it's part of the game of presenting Ukraine as an unreliable, as a poorly governed country, which is exactly what the Kremlin has been doing over the years, and until I mean, recently there were also statements. So Orban is just playing his portion of his portion of the game. The game is the rules of the game are being set in the Kremlin, and they give him a certain smaller but very important portion as a spoiler, as the disruptor of the European Union's unity and cohesion when it comes to Ukraine.
Yeah, actually, in terms of situations with Orban, with Fico, we are observing fragmentation of Europe. And I would like to ask you, do you assume that Putin can be successful in European fragmentation in future in broader scales? And how Brussels may protect itself?
Well, I mean, luckily, both Hungary and Slovakia are too small to actually fragment Europe. Even without them, I mean, obviously, relatively small population, small territories, smaller economies, especially Hungary, quite dependent on the European Union for its budgetary needs. So I don't think that only those two countries can completely fragment the European Union. Of course, if there was a sizable minority that threatens to become a majority, or if the, let's put it this way, pro-Ukrainian and anti-Ukrainian forces within the EU roughly equal, then well, we could talk of some kind of a serious rift, fragmentation, but only two countries. We'll see what Bulgaria. I mean, now it has a Ukrainian pro-Western government. Let's see what happens after March the 19th. Maybe some other countries, but still, these are smaller countries compared to the core countries of the European Union. So at this point, I don't see a major, serious fragmentation, but definitely disruptive efforts, as I said, like those countries acting as the spoilers of European unity and cohesion, and of course, at certain stages, they are able to block or delay European action when it comes to military aid, when it comes to budgetary issues, financial support for Ukraine, etc. But Brussels has been able to overcome their right of veto so far. So I hope this helps the EU elaborate and develop and implement a mechanism that would completely prevent such spoilers in the future from being able to act at the Kremlin's behest and disrupt the pro-Ukraine stance of the entire European Union.
Mark, how do you understand current Putin's position? I mean that Russia hasn't managed to achieve its main war goals during 4 years of the full-scale invasion, and a lot of experts say that Putin is trapped and he is a prisoner of this war. Do you agree with this statement?
Well, every dictator starts a war thinking that it would last 3 days, 1 week, 1 month. Actually, most countries enter wars without thinking of the consequences long term. I mean, the First World War started when people thought they would only fight for about a month or two, and then they'll go back home before autumn comes. And so yes, of course, Putin is caught in a trap because he's failing at the on the battlefield, but at the same time, he still seems to believe that he has unlimited resources, or at least, his resources will last longer than those of Ukraine and of Europe, especially when it comes to cheaper drones, when it comes to ballistic missiles from North Korea, obviously drones from Iran, electronic components from China, or through various countries. Obviously, now they have issues with selling their oil especially to India and other customers. But it depends on what information Putin gets from his from his circle. He seems to be in a bubble. Obviously, we sort of know that he doesn't read the internet, and so it's quite possible that he's being given information that things are actually better than they are. And if so, he will continue with his present course until Russia collapses, which has always been the case, both with the Soviet Union, with the Russian Empire. It all looks very stable. It all looks strong, very confident, pompous speeches and marches and talking, aggressive behavior and movements, and suddenly it collapses sometimes without notice. So I hope this will be the case this time. Fortunately, we don't know exactly what it's going to be in 1 month, half a year, next year. I mean, it will happen sometime in the future. But for the purpose of your question, as long as Putin and his regime seem to believe that they have the upper hand, they will continue with this war, unfortunately.
Yeah, and actually, in such a case, do you believe in any black swan event when it comes to Putin's fate and the end of Russia-Ukraine war? Something like the second Prigozhin's march or Palace coup?
Well, I mean, Palace coup is always a possibility, but that again, changes, that moves the sort of the action or the decision making from Putin to his entourage, because that would mean that someone around him in his circle or group of people would know the situation better. They would understand that it's not going well, and then they would decide to act and remove him. But then what would be the cause of that? A military failure on the battlefield, some economic, serious economic issue, maybe the credit crisis in Russia, credit and real estate. I mean, obviously Russia has suffered several economic crises over the years. So maybe the war economy that they had built, this Keynesian war economy, will not last so long. But again, so it's either the circumstances will overwhelm the regime and the system, and it will collapse, or again, maybe the regime elements around Putin will see where it's going, and then they'll try to remove the top echelon Putin and his immediate circle. Again, we're speculating, but for this to happen, they need to really, I mean, a black swan of this nature, major economic pressure, major political pressure on Russia that would threaten the system. You know, I don't see the Russian people at this point self-organizing to implement any meaningful political change.
Yeah, and the last point. Several months ago, we were observing the situation when Russia drones and fighter jets violate NATO airspace. It was a kind of intimidation and checking how organization would respond. I think that Putin got clear signal about NATO's indecision. How would Russia provoke and distract NATO further in future? We see attempts to blur NATO's unity, political interference, and other tools of hybrid war, but everything is supposed to develop. And I would like to ask you, how could events develop in this context, in Europe, in NATO countries?
Well, hybrid warfare is not only a fancy theoretical term. It's not only something that's written in the scientific books and articles. It's a reality that we, I mean, obviously Ukraine, but also Eastern Europe and all of Europe, America too, it has been experiencing for decades now. And so it includes not only military elements, but actually predominantly non-military ones. Beginning from political warfare, of course, information warfare is central. Then there's lawfare, the so-called legal warfare. Then infrastructure, which you've been suffering from so badly. Energy, crime. I mean, any area, any sphere of human activity has been weaponized by Russia. And it looks like I call it a hybrid hydra. And so if Russia wants to use it, or when Russia decides to deploy it fully, of course, it will start with the information stage, where it would, for many months and weeks before any conflict, any real visible conflict, they would be bombarding the information space globally, but also in Europe, and against the target nations with propaganda and disinformation. That's called preparation of the battle space. So this will be the information warfare front. Then they will start looking for quasi-legal justifications, the lawfare, obviously protecting minorities, protecting Russian citizens, etc., various hybrid pretexts, as I call them. And then after that, they will start with cyber attacks. They will start with infiltrating little green men, disguised as civilians, also maybe putting pressure through migrants, illegals, criminals. And then at some point, the non-military aspect, they will be cutting cables, of course, and disrupting communications. And at some point, there will be drone attacks, potentially missile attacks, so they don't have to roll the tanks the way they did against Kyiv. I mean, they could, and ideally, if they could, they would. But definitely, I would imagine that hundreds of drones against one of the Baltic capitals, dozens of missiles, or against Poland, maybe Romania, or some of the bases there, that would disrupt those nations quite dramatically. And for the West, for NATO, it will be difficult to put out all these fires if they're simultaneous. Imagine Riga, Tallinn, Vilnius, Warsaw, maybe Finland. So unfortunately, Russia, with its territory, It's like as I said, an octopus, a hydra that can reach across various borders and hit different countries at the same time and create this global, or at least pan-European pressure, which would lead to a military crisis. The question is, how would NATO respond? Would they declare Article 5? Definitely, if Russia is to roll the tanks and send troops in an open fashion, that would be an Article 5 scenario. Question is, would a hybrid attack be considered? Yes, according to the NATO doctrine, that should be the case. It remains to be seen whether the theory in the doctrine would match the reality on the ground and the actions of Brussels and Washington in this case. I really hope it does.
Mark, thank you very much for this interview, and goodbye. See you.
Thank you, Maxim. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure joining your broadcast.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.